Most people think rainwater is perfect for ponds. It's natural, it's clean, it's free, so it must be ideal. But what if it was actually making your pond less stable and more prone to algae? Today I want to dive into rainwater in a pond, how to improve stability, and possibly reduce algae. But if you don't already know me, my name is Kev, and I help people build and maintain ponds without spending a fortune. If that sounds like something that interests you, you might like to subscribe and visit my website, Ozponds.com. So when we talk about rainwater, we're usually thinking about something clean and pure, and in a way it is. Pure rainwater typically has very low dissolved solids. That just means there's not much stuff dissolved in the water, things like minerals, salts and trace elements. All of that adds up to what's called total dissolved solids, or TDS. So when TDS is low, the water's very empty, and it also has no alkalinity. And this one's really important. Alkalinity is basically the water's ability to resist change. More specifically, it's made up of things like bicarbonate and carbonate, and these act like a buffer against acids. I'll tell you why this is important in a minute. But when a pond has good alkalinity, it can absorb changes without swinging too much. Rainwater has almost none of this, so instead of being stable, it's very easy to push around. Rainwater is also usually acidic. That's because carbon dioxide in the air dissolves into water and forms a weak acid. Nothing extreme, but it does mean that the water is starting on the slightly acidic side. Now once rainwater hits your pond, it's not completely pure anymore. It can bring in things like dust, which can contain nutrients like phosphorus, organic matter like leaves and pollen, and even small amounts of nitrogen from the atmosphere. So it's not pure in a lab sense. But here's the key idea. Even with all of that, rainwater is still very low in buffering, and that's what really matters. So let's talk about buffering, because that's the backbone of everything. Your pond is constantly producing acids. That's part of how a pond works. Every time fish produce waste, every time something breaks down, and every time bacteria process nutrients, acids are being released into the water. Now normally that would cause the pH drop over time, but this is where buffering comes in. Buffering is made up of things like bicarbonate and carbonate, and what they do is neutralize those acids as they're being produced. You can think of it like a shock absorber. Instead of the system reacting constantly to every little change, the buffer steps in and softens the impact. What's happening is those buffering compounds react with the acids and basically soak them up, so they don't build up in the water. And that means the pH stays more stable, even though all these processes are happening in the background. Another interesting part of this is that some of the bacteria in your pond actually use that buffering as a carbon source. So when alkalinity is very low, it's not just about stability, it can also limit how effectively the system processes waste in the first place. So in a well-buffered pond, you've still got the same biological activity, but the system can handle it. It absorbs the pressure instead of reacting to it. But if there's very little buffering, like a rainwater-dominated pond, then there's nothing here to neutralize those acids. So they start to accumulate and the system becomes much more sensitive. Small changes that wouldn't normally matter suddenly have a much bigger effect. And that's where instability starts to creep in. When a pond has very low buffering, the changes aren't always dramatic. You don't usually see a sudden crash. What you get instead is a system that's just a bit off. The pH can slowly drift and it can move up and down more easily, and that starts to affect the biology of the pond. The bacteria that process waste prefer stable conditions. When things are constantly shifting, they don't perform as consistently. So instead of nutrients being processed smoothly, you start to get little inconsistencies. At the same time, plants also struggle in unstable conditions. They prefer a steady environment where they can establish and grow properly. If the system keeps shifting, they don't compete as well, and this is where string algae can start to come into play. It's very opportunistic and it can respond quickly to changes in the environment. So when you've got a system that's a bit unstable, with nutrients coming through in small pulses instead of being processed steadily, algae is often the first thing to take advantage of that. Another part of this is carbon. In low buffering systems, more carbon tends to be available as free CO2, rather than being held in a more stable form. And string algae can use that very quickly, often faster than higher plants. So instead of the plants getting it, the algae can fill the gap. And this is why you can end up with algae in a pond that doesn't seem like it has a lot of nutrients at all. It's not just about how much is in the system, it's about how stable the system is, and how well it can process what comes in. One thing that's really important to understand is that natural ponds don't stay stable because the water's perfect. They stay stable because the system builds its own buffering over time. As a pond matures, it starts to accumulate minerals from things like rocks, the substrate, sediments, and the incoming water. All of that adds to what we talked about earlier as dissolved solids. The water's no longer empty. And within all that, you can start to build up things like the carbonates and the bicarbonates, which form your buffering. Now earlier we talked about your pond constantly producing acids, so you can think of it like this. The biology is always pushing the system in one direction, and the buffering's pushing it back the other way. It's not about perfect balance at every moment. It's about the system having enough resistance that those things don't turn into swings. So instead of the pH moving every time something happens, the system absorbs it and stays steady. Another big part of this is where those minerals actually come from in nature. In lakes, rivers, and natural ponds, they're all part of a larger catchment. Water moves across land, through soil, over rocks, and as it does, it picks up minerals along the way. Those minerals end up in the water and contribute to buffering. So natural systems are constantly being supplied with the things that they need to help stabilise them. In a backyard pond, especially when relying heavily on rainwater, you don't always have that same input, so the system can stay very clean, or have a lower TDS. But then something else happens as a pond matures. It builds biological depth. You get more bacteria, more plant mass, more surface for life to grow on, and more pathways for nutrients to move through the system. So when something enters the ponds, like leaf, dust or nutrients, it doesn't cause a spike, it gets absorbed, processed and spread out. That's a big difference. In young or low buffering systems, inputs create swings, whereas in mature systems, inputs get smoothed out. And it is worth knowing that not all natural systems rely on buffering in the same way. There are environments like black water systems in parts of the Amazon, where the water's naturally very low in minerals and quite acidic. But these systems stay stable because nutrient inputs are low and the plants and organisms are adapted to those conditions. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got systems like African cichlid lakes, which are very high in minerals and very stable from buffering point of view. So both can work, but they work for different reasons. And that's the key takeaway here. Your average backyard pond sits somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have the constant mineral input of a large natural system, and it doesn't have the specialised conditions of something like a black water environment. So stability usually comes from building enough buffering and enough biological depth for the system to handle change. So in my own ponds, I've always aimed for low nutrients. And when I say that, what I really mean is low waste. I don't want a heap of fish producing heaps of waste because that means more filtration, more intervention and more work. I'm lazy and I like keeping things simple and low maintenance. And generally speaking, lower inputs do make a pond easier to manage, but it's only part of the picture. Because as you can see, you can still end up with a pond that's low in nutrient, low in dissolved solids, and especially if it's relying purely on rainwater, low in buffering as well. And that combination can actually make the system less stable, not more. The way I think about ponds is pretty simple. I try to build in as much natural structure as I can from the start. Things like rock and gravel, plants, timber and organic material, water movement from streams and waterfalls. All of this adds surface area, oxygen, supports biology and helps the system stabilise over time. You can also add in buffering materials like calcium carbonate. You can add that manually or naturally with things like limestone, shell grit and crushed coral. This doesn't just dissolve constantly in the water, it tends to dissolve more when the water becomes acidic, so it acts as a slow passive buffer that helps stabilise the system over time. In some cases, people use things like bicarbonate soda to raise the alkalinity, or do small water changes to bring in minerals from their source water. And that can help, especially if your source water has some buffering in it. And that opens up another can of worms about water changes, and they're a bit of a topic on their own, because they don't just add minerals, they can also dilute things. But maybe I'll cover that in another video. Just let me know in the comments if that's something you're interested in. because over time nutrients can build up in a pond and that can push the system in the other direction. And that's where things like rain events or small water changes can actually help by bringing things back down. So there's a bit of a balancing act going on. Sometimes the system drifts one way, sometimes it drifts another, and the life inside the pond responds to that. And that might be algae, it might be bacteria, it might even be things like Daphnia blooming for a while. And that's the kind of pond I like. Something that's not perfectly controlled, but stable enough to evolve and adjust over time. If you'd like to learn how I build and design my ponds, you can learn more at ozponds.com. But the way I see it, rainwater isn't bad for your pond, and it's not perfect either. It's just one part of the system. Over time, the water in your pond starts to reflect everything around it, the rocks, the sediment, the plants, and the biology inside it. And as that happens, the system builds its own stability. You'll still get change at times of the year, and you'll still get algae at times, but that's just part of how a pond works. What really matters is not trying to control every little detail. It's building a system that can handle change. And when you get that right, the pond doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to work. And if you want to hear about why I don't care about certain water parameters, you might like to watch this video next. I hope this was helpful and not too boring. Thanks for watching. See ya.